Justin Halpern, Patrick Schumacher, you're nominated for Best Comedy Series for the third time for Abbott Elementary, very much keeping network comedy alive. What are some of the creative and professional benefits of telling stories on network television?
I think the first is that you have the opportunity to still reach a really broad audience. I think that was always from the start what Quinta wanted to do. She wanted to be able to get into the living rooms of just everyday people who maybe didn't have enough money to afford a streamer or anything like that. And I think so when you are on network, you still, even though it's obviously much more diminished than it was, say, 5, 10, 15 years ago, it's still a massive, broad audience that kind of pulls from so many different demographics. And so I think part of the fun is that you get to tell stories that uh, really can travel via word of mouth to places that maybe normally you wouldn't get access to.
Yeah, and you expanded the world of Abbott Elementary this season to include the district where Janine took a fellowship. How did you decide you wanted to open up the story that way?
I mean, I think every season, kind of before the writers' room starts, we talk about, what is a different facet of the public school system that we can kind of focus on. And we did charter schools in season 2, and then expansion into like the world of the district kind of came out of the idea that Janine was sort of questioning her vocation and what she wanted to do with her life, and so that season 3 became kind of this voyage of self-discovery for her. And yeah, and we sort of have also made, not a mandate, but we've been interested in kind of just broadening the world of the show out with every season too. So season 1 we were sort of like in the walls of Abbott, but now we're like in the teachers' homes, and so yeah, the district made a lot of sense, and I think we were blessed with a cast of characters and actors that really filled out the world, and they were unique, funny characters in their own right. So we got lucky.
I imagine the school itself will always remain the central home base for the series. But are you constantly considering other ways to expand the show? Like, will we see more aspects of the public school system, or go even deeper into the characters' lives?
I think we like to think of it in terms of character first. So I think if we feel like when we're talking about character arcs and growth, if that necessitates us going outside of the school more or seeing more of their lives, then it will. I mean, that was the impetus for the district, was that we wanted Janine to kind of test the theory of, do I want to be in a place where I can make more of a difference potentially on a larger scale? And so then the district was born. So I think, we like to just let our characters kind of dictate what we're going to see.
And one challenge that you faced this past season, of course, was the writers and actors strikes, which affected the show. The season was shorter with 14 episodes. Did a lot of initial story plans need to be changed, or kind of moved around, due to the shorter season?
Not really. I mean, I think we're pretty nimble, and I think we're pretty quick. And so, we knew that the storyline was going to be abbreviated. So I think once we started breaking out the season, we knew that there were certain characters whose kind of interior lives we weren't going to be able to explore as in depth as we had originally wanted to. We had like a storyline in season 3 where Jacob and Melissa, move in together, or Jacob moves into Melissa's house. And I think we would have, spent a lot more time there had we had a full 22 episode season, like we're enjoying in season 4, which we're writing now. So it wasn't really that we had these sort of big plans that we had to sort of set aside. But it was sort of like when we were in the thick of it, in late September, when the room convened. And by the way, like the strike ended, and then it was like, okay, go. Like, how quickly can you get the room up and running? And we were like, working out of like someone's house like the first 2 days, and then we were at a temporary office because the SAG strike was still happening. We weren't going to cross a picket line. We had to find a space that was inobtrusive, and so we were kind of nomads for the first month, I would say. But yeah, it was really more just about like taking away a little bit of our ability to get in deeper with some of these through lines with some of the characters on the show. But the main focus with Janine and the district and the evolution of her relationship with Gregory, I think we were able to tell that as fully as we had originally intended.
And that storyline, the Janine and Gregory relationship, is one of the been one of the main aspects of the series for the last few seasons, and it came to a head, of course, in the season finale. There have been a lot of will they or won't they relationships on TV. So, what are some of the keys, do you think, of keeping the relationship compelling? Keeping it true to the characters.
I think it's in the characters themselves, right? Like I think like if you're trying to manufacture a will they won't they and you're kind of like trying to do it synthetically, I think it just ends up being kind of boring, and audiences kind of know all the beats that are going to happen, and you're sort of like you're along for the ride, but you know where the ride's going. I think we've always tried to approach it as like, when would these characters organically run into each other in a moment when things would work, and sort of look at each character individually, and I think that's how we hopefully keep it fresh. We also like try to really do a lot of character work with each character individually in terms of their own growth, and I think that's ultimately gonna guide us in the will they won't they. It's like when you pitch a show, it's like every network's like, well, what's the will they won't they, what's the love interest, and I think we tried to make sure we didn't run into that same kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to do it too soon, but you also don't want to like tire people out. And I think I have the feeling, just based on feedback, that we pushed it to about the limit.
We went as far as we could go
before people started rioting. So I'm really pleased with the way that it did unfold. But yeah, like Justin was saying, it was like, but Gregory and Janine, they were in different places in their lives, and it's like, even though we're rooting for them to be together as a couple, it takes two of them to both be ready at the exact same time. And so it was the end of season 3 when that felt right to us.
You mentioned, the storyline with Jacob breaking up with his boyfriend and moving in with Melissa. Those are two characters who, are very different. We don't necessarily think of them together, under normal circumstances. What makes you, what made you want to kind of pair those two and explore that dynamic?
I think we both think that those two I mean, for all the reasons you just said, really, we were like, these two characters are really fun together. They seem sort of like classically odd couple. And I also think we wanted both of those characters to be able to, at some point, and we didn't even totally do it yet, but access some like heavier emotional things, and to be able to do that with each other. And I think, just when you move in with someone, you learn all kinds of shit about them that you normally would never know. And so I think that's where we saw it being the most fun. Is Melissa's a really private person. Jacob is seemingly very outgoing in public, and yet so much of his life we don't know anything about. So it just felt like a fun way to start to explore that stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's also like, here's two characters that, you're like, where are they gonna like find the common ground? Like the odd couple sort of reference point that Justin mentioned before, like, how do they find that like common ground becomes kind of a delicious, challenge to try and figure out. And I think that was a lot of the focus too, that like, once Jacob moves in, like I think the sort of maybe cliche or expected thing was that Melissa, he was just going to drive Melissa crazy, but then we did find some, common ground with, their love of like reality television, stuff like that. And I found those scenes to be really rewarding, just seeing those two characters on the couch, eating popcorn, watching Housewives. It was just really gratifying seeing them make this connection that they might not normally make in the context of work.
The show gets a lot of its humor from the challenges and limitations of being a public school teacher. But I think one of the things that has been always so appealing about the show is that it maintains its optimism, despite those challenges. Is it especially important for both of you to, avoid cynicism and kind of keep it hopeful on the show?
Well, I would actually kind of counter that just a little bit in that I would say that there are some shows that are like, we're going to be the warm, optimistic show, the soft blanket you put on at night. And we're going to exist in a world that is sort of denying the reality that the rest of us exist in. And I think for us, it's always been really important with Abbott that we acknowledge the realities of the world that are tough and challenging and sometimes upsetting. And then we find humor, we try to find humor and heart within those things. And optimism, so I think we never try to start out with like, how are we going to make you feel good? We try to start out with like, what are the realities that these teachers are going through in their real lives? Let's never gaslight people and say that these things aren't happening. And then let's work from there.
Yeah, and I think in addition to that too, we don't really set out to make the show about issues. Like we don't, they happen organically, right?
Yeah.
But like we're not starting with an idea for a story where we're like, oh, here's this like, hot button issue that's happening in this country right now. Let's tell a story about that. I mean, as Justin said before, like all of our storylines derive first from character. And so, if it's serendipitously, dovetails with an interesting issue that isn't too dark, then great, as long as it feels organic. But we're always coming at it from a place of character.
That was my lunch that fell. It's okay. We're gonna
He ate it.
Yeah, we're gonna keep going. I messed up. I should have had it somewhere more stable.
We're actually doing our own Foley work on Abbott this year.
But you know what? That's life. Sometimes your lunch falls in the middle of an interview, and those are the kind of things we try to deal with at Abbott.
Yeah, and we will maintain optimism and carry on through the hardship. Absolutely.
That's right. That's right. Thank you. What a good segue.
It's almost entirely on the floor, so nothing else can really go wrong.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, thank you so much for talking with me about Abbott, and we will bring you back for our group discussion.
Awesome.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
Abe Sylvia, you're the creator and showrunner for Palm Royale, which is Emmy nominated for Best Comedy Series and is actually the most nominated new comedy of the season with 11 nominations total. Did you anticipate that kind of reception for the show? Like, what were your reactions to all that?
I really try to sort of control the experience on sort of the nomination morning. So last year I had a horse in the race with George and Tammy, and I got really sort of worked up and followed all the prognosticators and probably put myself into a state that I shouldn't have been in. And this year I decided to do it differently. And so when the nominations were coming out, I made a hair appointment. And for the exact time the nominations were being announced, and I was like, well, when I come out, we'll either get a couple nominations or we won't, but at least like my hair will be fresh and I'll be walking through Central Park. And so I come out of my hair appointment and I look at my phone and my phone isn't buzzing or anything. So I'm like, okay, fine. Like that's cool. And then I forgot that like I don't get any reception in where I get my hair done. So as soon as I stepped out of the building, my phone lit up and it was just such a thrill. But I'd already made my peace with the fact that we hadn't. And so I sort of got both experiences. So we were thrilled, and I think we were certainly thrilled for Kristen and thrilled for Carol, and but what was really gratifying was sort of the breadth of the artisans that were nominated, and production design and hair and makeup and music. And that was just very exciting that the crafts were acknowledged to the degree that they were.
And those crafts are really impressive. The way the show captures that 1960s aesthetic and really kind of heightens it and makes it really really pop on the screen. How complex was the production from a technical standpoint, having all these all these details to reckon with?
I was saying the other day that we got to make the show that you went into show business to make. You used to like when you're a little kid and you're watching big MGM movie musicals and like the movies and TV shows that you sort of fell in love with that made you want to go into show business. We all got to make that. I was saying to Alex Freeberg, the costume designer, that like so often we sort of live in a hoodie and backpack world where like most shows are flannels and hoodies and backpacks, and our shows was ball gowns and big hairdos and astronauts and showgirls, and so it was just a thrill the whole time. And luckily we had Apple's support to take big swings, and to be able to shoot it at Paramount, the sort of this storied lot. It was a dream. Yeah, it was complex, but we have a great line producer, a great UPM, great ADs. It's like we're shooting in LA where you're getting the best of the best, bringing their best and working on something that everybody was in love with. So it was just fun, and yeah, there were hard days. I think the hardest part was that we were just tired, you just get tired after all that delight and stimulation.
The series is inspired by the novel Mr. and Mrs. American Pie by Juliet McDaniel. What did that book mean to you when you read it, and what made you want to adapt it?
Well, it had this central character that I thought was really interesting. This sort of kind of bull in a china shop female character that was I don't know. I always kind of respond to iconoclastic women as and this one was mouthy and kind of said all the wrong things at the right time. And so that was sort of the jumping off point. But books are one thing, and TV shows are another. And we wanted this to be really hopefully a long running ongoing series. And so we opened up the world and moved this. The book takes place in Palm Springs in Arizona, and we moved it to Palm Beach and added a bunch of characters. And so while there certainly was the kernel of inspiration, we've moved off of the plot of the book almost entirely. But the spirit of the book, I think, is very much remains.
The story being set in 1969, was a lot of research required beyond the book to kind of capture that era?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there were certainly, we were inspired by events of the late 60s. It wasn't necessarily a one for one. It was like space exploration. We wanted to kind of get in there. The fight for women's rights. Mentions of Stonewall, but like for the most part, these women in their country club, they live in Palm Beach because it is a walled off society. It's like the real world doesn't get in, and so it was more about sort of creating this world of beauty and having what's actually happening in the world, whether it be Vietnam or the struggle of women. It just sort of like seeps in, and they've all got sort of these Archie Bunker blinders on, under their caftans. So there wasn't a whole lot of research. We would come in and be really inspired. Robert's character, played by Ricky Martin, we were really inspired by the story of Oliver Sipple, which is a gay veteran who was living sort of a closeted life from his family in San Francisco. And he was the man who thwarted Sarah Jane Moore's attempt to assassinate Gerald Ford, and what that did to his life. And so like we always knew that he was going to sort of thwart this assassination attempt. And it's like, what does that do to a closeted gay man to be thrust into the spotlight? So little things like that, or even the Sarah Jane Moore aspect with Julia Duffy's character, that one day a housewife woke up in this time and said, oh gosh, the most rational thing I could do today is wake up and try to kill the president. So there were things of the time that we were certainly paying homage to, but we weren't sort of strictly historic.
Your central character, Maxine, goes to great lengths to climb the social ladder. Uh, what did you think going into it about those themes of, the pursuit of status, the appearance of success, and what real success actually might look
Well, it's sort of like writ large and absurd in our show, but I think it's a very human need. Whether or not, sort of the desire of belonging for an individual is defined in the way Maxine defines it. I think especially like, in the US, there's sort of this idea of American exceptionalism that like my best self is somewhere else. That, if I just try hard enough and I'm nice enough to enough people, like I will reach this nirvana of this like perfected self that everybody loves and that everybody accepts and everybody wants to be around. And I just think it's kind of, like, and I feel that way. I think a lot of people I know feel that way. And I just think it's kind of sad. So that's kind of the jumping off point of the show and even Maxine's character. And you sort of look at social media and like, people sort of curating their lives to have this projected self that strangers can like or dislike. It's like, how relatable is Maxine's struggle to like fit in with a superficial society and present a certain way just, so somebody will smile at her. It's just a very sort of human thing. And I think by putting it in the 60s and sort of dressing it up the way we do, create enough distance that people don't, while people relate to it, they don't fully see themselves in a way that they feel, maybe confronted, and they can allow themselves to laugh and lose themselves, and it's escapist, but there's enough, I think, connectivity in the parable that people find themselves in it, even if they don't realize it.
The series has this really heightened blend of comedy and drama. It's really kind of walking that tightrope really well. How challenging was it to achieve the right balance for the show?
Not terribly. I mean, I think we're working with sort of in my brain, sort of like sort of a gay Fantasia aesthetic. Like it is sort of a unique mashup of genres. Sort of call it like a comedic melodramedy. And I think it is sort of unique to sort of queer filmmakers who take, multiple genres and pastiche and blend them all together to kind of like make something new. So I do think the show sort of hits a sweet spot. And some people are like, wait, is this a comedy? Is it a drama? Is it a mystery? Is it a soap opera? And the answer is yes, it's all those things. And, I like to say like, Americans are really like accepting of something like that if it's in a foreign language. It's like you look at a movie like, Pedro Almodovar movie, and it's like, oh, I just love like all the places it can go. But as soon as it's in English, it's like, well, this is very distancing and not grounded. So what we're doing is, for my money, is not new, and it's certainly like a sweet spot that our actors can hit. We've got Kristen Wiig and Allison Janney and Carol Burnett and Laura Dern, and it's like those people can they can swing from the absurd to pathos, all while playing style. I mean, they're magicians, and so skilled as actresses that it's just such a joy to be with sort of like-minded people who can kind of go anywhere with you and make it real.
And the season
real by the rules of its own, of the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And the season ended on a cliffhanger, but the show is coming back for season 2. How far ahead generally do you have planned out in your mind, for the story? Are you thinking several seasons ahead? Are you taking it kind of, year by year, where you want the story to go?
When I first pitched the show to Apple, I had a 3-season arc that I pitched them. Hopefully going further, but just for the purposes of selling the show, you say, here are the first 3 seasons, just so you can kind of prove that it's got legs. But then you get in with other writers, and things change along the way, and the cast comes, and you start seeing, all of the superpowers that are in your toolbox now that you've assembled your writers, you've assembled your cast, you've assembled your designers, and as Dr. Seuss says, you've got, you kind of wonder at all the places you can go. So, as it pertains from, like going from season 1 to season 2, we had, by the time we got to the end of season 1, we knew where season 2 was going to go. And I think by the time we get to the end of season 2, we all have a really strong idea of where 3 is going. And it is an organic process. I think you can only do so much mapping without making the results stale. I think there's especially a show like ours, I think there's a spontaneity to it, that for all the planning ahead you have to do for the, to execute the design of it and have that many extras and, have that much beauty in the sets and the costumes and all that. You need to be nimble enough to sort of like capture the spontaneity of the moment. And we feel that way about story too. And sometimes you get a combination of people on set, got to think about halfway through shooting, had a 2-shot with Ricky Martin and Josh Lucas. And I ran back to the writer's room. I said, that's a combination of actors that we haven't explored. And it was just such an exciting, magnetic 2-shot of these just fabulous actors and fabulous looking men that it's like, we have to keep going with this. And we hadn't planned. And so we ended up sort of building out this arc that we had initially, when we opened the writer's room on day 1, didn't even know was sitting right there in front of us. So, yes, you sort of a general idea, and we definitely know where we were going when we wrote the finale of season 1. We knew where season 2 was going to kick off, but we're very excited by where it's going.
Well, congratulations on the show and its Emmy nominations, and say thank you so much for talking with me about it today. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much.
I'm Daniel Montgomery here for our Meet the Experts panel of Emmy-nominated showrunners. I'm joined by Justin Halpern and Patrick Schumacker from Abbott Elementary and Abe Sylvia from Palm Royale. Now, first off, you're all nominated for Best Comedy Series this year. So let's start with a general question. Like, what do you think are some of the key ingredients to making a comedy successful? Start with Justin.
Being funny. I think that it's funny. There's a lot of sort of talk about like, what is a comedy? What isn't a comedy? And for us, it's like we enter every episode when we go to break the story. We try to think, how are we going to make people laugh? That is our intent. And so I think it's pretty simple. It's having funny characters and trying to, tell a story that will make the audience laugh.
I have nothing to add to that. I think that would.
And how about you, Abe?
No, I totally co-sign that, and I would just add, I think when it comes to our show, that there's like an underlying pathos to every joke. So, everyone's talking about like what's a comedy, what's a drama, like in this, in this world, it's like Joni Mitchell says laughing and crying are the same release. So it's like, if you're gonna get a laugh, it's because there is pain there. There's an identifiable, catharsis that's around it. So it's like, yes, it's about getting the laugh, but I think there are things that are like objectively funny on paper. It's like, I can be aware that's like, okay, technically I guess that's funny. But if that other thing isn't there that is identifiable as like some form of suffering, you're not going to get the real laugh. So that's the only thing I would sort of add to that, you sort of need that other element. Otherwise, it's also sort of just hackery,
Yeah, I really agree with that, because I feel like, again, I think it's kind of, we had mentioned this earlier, but my favorite comedies are the ones that don't exist in like this alternate universe. They are ones where we are, adhering to it doesn't mean they can't be surreal or anything like that, but I just mean they're adhering to like the human experience, and that is the underlying foundation of it. And from there, we try to build on that and be funny. And I agree. I think like the biggest laughs come from things that are sometimes like upsetting or real. It's all building the same tension, and it's just in which way are we going to release that tension.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that like dichotomy of like laughing and crying being the same release, because we've had a lot of feedback on, at least as far as Abbott's concerned, like from teachers, and most of them are like, this is hilarious and I feel seen. And but there is a smaller percentage of them that are like, oh my God, this show is giving me PTSD, I feel seen. So
Yeah.
two sides of the same coin. Yeah.
And either way, they're watching, so we don't give a shit.
And being a showrunner is more than just writing, although that's a huge part of it. What would you say is your favorite aspect of running a show and overseeing a production like you do, Abe?
I just sort of like hosting the party. I think I do like people to bring their best, and I like people to surprise me. And I think if people are kind of running around scared of you, that's not going to happen. So in empowering people to delight themselves, it's like you sort of give people parameters of what you're looking for, and then you empower them to like make, if you've got two choices to make, bring me the one that makes you giggle, bring me the one that brings you joy. That part's really, really fun. Like the additive qualities. It's like, as writers, we grind and we grind and we grind and we grind on these scripts. And that's actually that is the hardest part. The hardest part, hands down, for me, I don't mean to speak for everybody, the hardest part is in the room, like where you're staring at a blank page and there's nothing there. Those pages getting into the hands of the designers, then getting into the hands of the actors. And when the icing starts coming and suddenly you're there and it's this thing is alive in front of you, that's really exciting. The party is happening and you're sort of the conductor. Like that's kind of that's the thrilling part.
Justin?
Yeah, for me, just going through the line items of a budget, it's just like, that just does it for me. But no,
I'm really good at Excel.
Yeah, I like the part that's like, I was describing the other day, is like running a show is like one part, this like amazing creative collaboration, and the other part is just like managing a fucking McDonald's. Like it's just like, it's just simple management work that's like hard and tedious and kind of boring, but it is necessary to make all of the creative stuff that you want to have happen.
Do you love talking on the phone?
I love it. I love just a meeting where no one really came with an agenda and we're all just sitting there trying to figure out who called the meeting.
Give it to me.
Yeah. But I agree. I think the collaboration is the most fun part. I mean, it's seeing stuff that somebody pitches a joke and then somebody beats that joke, or somebody pitches an idea and somebody else pitches an idea. I think the most exciting part about show running for me is when somebody shows me that I'm wrong, because that means we got to a better idea.
Yep.
And that's where you get super excited. That's why you have a room.
Yeah. I mean, we are, obviously partners, and, with Abbott, we have a unique sort of like three-headed entity, with Quinta also being the showrunner and also the star of the show. And I think for all of us, but I mean, Justin spends like the lion's share of the time in the writer's room. And that's kind of his station, and probably I would say your favorite part of the job.
Yeah, for sure.
I am kind of more of like a floater, like in pre-production, I'm in the writer's room the whole time. But then once we go into production, I'm like back and forth. Going to direct an episode this year. I love being on set, just as much as being in the writer's room. And so I love just being able to participate in like every aspect of a production. Which you're obviously privy to, being in this role. But I actually don't know how like solo showrunners do it, other than having an amazing group to collaborate with. Justin and I have only ever run shows together, and sometimes with a third person, as in Abbott and some of our other shows. So to be able to sort of divide and conquer in that way is the only way that I think I could be sane. But yeah, I just love kind of being able to be a part of it all.
Now you all work in writers' rooms, of course, but like, what's your ideal environment in general for writing or sparking ideas and creativity? Like, is there a particular routine that you have, or habits that you've developed? How about you, Patrick?
Well, we start off the day by with about 45 minutes of YouTube. And then, no, I mean, like, honestly, though, it's like, for me, I think the ideal environment or the way to kind of kick things off every day is kind of organically, and you just do sort of like host chat. Yeah, exactly. And just get everybody talking. And we're all friends here at Abbott, and I think we try and run kind of like a meritocracy, and try and make sure that everybody knows that, like, so what, it's a bad idea, we'll move on. Nobody's gonna linger on it. It's a safe place. It just becomes like a big fun conversation. And that has worked out really well for us. Just making sure that everybody feels welcome, and they're not the ideas aren't always going to be winners. I've yesterday pitched one of the worst jokes I've ever pitched in my life and moved on from it. So I know
I haven't.
Yeah, Justin's never pitched a bad joke.
No, I haven't moved on from it.
Oh, okay. He's batting 1,000 though, jokes wise.
Justin?
Oh, you don't need to hear me again. Abe, you go.
Well, I don't know. Like, I think to sort of get the best out of the writers, you kind of get the world out of their system, our system. Like, we're sensitive creatures. We're like all super engaged with what's happening at any given moment on the planet, and we're all reading everything. We're all terrified of the world, like, and also we're trying to make a lighthearted, delightful show. And so oftentimes we'll sort of start not only just sort of start the day with like, hey, what'd you guys do last night, yada yada. We're sort of like, let's do 10 minutes on the world, and because I've found that, like, if we don't sort of put a time limit on it, it just takes over the day. So we have to kind of like, okay, let's get the, like, who read HuffPost, let's do like 20-30 minutes of like world catharsis, and then we have to then we just pivot really quickly to the room. Because I remember I was doing George and Tammy, and it was all during, like, the writers' room was like happening during January 6th and the recount, and we're trying to do the writers' room at the same time, and it is like it's like it was impossible to work. And so I think I've gotten better at running a compartmentalized writer's room. It's like, okay, we're still, this is still a multi-million-dollar corporation we're trying to run. And so there is a bit of it that is like, okay, we gotta take our feelings and use them, but let's make time for each thing and room for it. But there were a few days there where on Paramount's dime, we had like just days of group therapy. I'm like, okay, we can't do that this time during this particular election. So, fingers crossed, we only have to do 10 minutes a day, but I have a feeling we're going to be doing more as this season wears on. But right now we're doing 10 to 15 minutes. That I feel like is a solid practice.
As writers, I'm wondering who or what inspired you early on in your careers? Like, was there a particular writer or a particular film or TV show, or something that made you kind of want to put pen to paper for the first time, and sort of tell stories? We could start with Justin.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up loving Seinfeld and The Simpsons. To the point where I wrote a letter to one of the writers on the show. I was just a kid. My dad was in the Navy. We lived in San Diego, and I just wrote care of The Simpsons Fox, and I sent a letter to Jen Crittenden, who had written on Seinfeld and The Simpsons, just being like, I didn't know this was a job. This is amazing, and this is what got me into writing. And then later got to meet her many years later and really creep her out. But I think for me, those were my kind of formative shows. It was these shows that the Simpsons, which actually has a lot more heart than people might imagine, but was like a joke machine, and Seinfeld because it was this like sort of brilliant character work paired with just incredible performers. And then even on top of that, I would say like The Comeback with Lisa Kudrow and Veep continued to inspire me as I was working in this job. Just the level of joke writing on that show was so incredibly high. It was like watching, a magic trick.
Yeah.
Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, TV wise, growing up, I would say SNL was huge. I had like every episode just recorded off the TV. There's the VHS tapes are still in my mom's basement in St. Louis. Frasier was a big one. Just brilliant show, perfect pilot. And movie wise, Wayne's World and Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which is Pee-wee's is like it's surreal for me working at Warner Brothers every day because I'm basically working in the third act of Pee-wee's Big Adventure the entire day, which is just wild. And I have to pinch myself every day I drive onto the lot.
I have to co-sign on the comeback just because we just have to give it all of its props.
Yes.
Just the show is perfect. And I would say like a cousin to that is Enlightened.
Oh, incredible show.
Like the Todd Haynes directed episode of Enlightened is the most perfect 30 minutes of television in the last 25 years, and I stand by that. So, but that I wasn't a kid during those years, but I would say, I think, and again, I wasn't a kid when this happened, but I was transitioning to writing when The Sopranos aired, and I know there's all these arguments like what's the best show, ever like in television history. And, is it The Wire or is it Breaking Bad? I'm like, it is The Sopranos. Like there is like, why are we having this discussion? But as a kid, like, it was John Waters all the way. Like those movies like spoke to me like as a kid in Oklahoma of like, just like absurdism and just like taking the piss out of the suburban and with just like unabashed, just queer punk ass rebellion. Like that, that's the thing that sort of lit my fire, was like Divine screaming, "I want my cha-cha heels." Like I didn't even know why it was funny and I was laughing. And I still don't know why it's funny, but like I now know how to make that kind of joke, because it spoke to me. So that's it's anything John Waters.
And who is a dream collaborator who you would love to work with, or maybe an actor you'd love to write for and get to see your words coming out of their mouth? Abe, you're working with probably the A-list of A-list casts, so you might be working with them already.
I've had some great experiences, like having been the biggest fan of The Sopranos, to work on Nurse Jackie then for 3 years with Edie Falco was unreal. And this cast is, I mean, to go to work and hang out with Carol Burnett's awesome. I'd love to work with Sally Struthers. I think just like a treasure of American television, who I just think is an untapped resource. Someone like Sally Struthers, that's my movie star, anyway, that's who I want to work with. I'd like to work with Sally Struthers.
Nice. I would say Julia Dreyfus and Lisa Kudrow are like probably the two greatest sitcom actresses that have ever lived. And I think both of them are able to carry so much in every line that I would love. I mean, you're always looking for somebody who takes what you put on the page and makes it 10 times better. And I think those two are just like a level of brilliance that it feels generational to me. So I would say those two. It's a good answer.
I'll go with Matthew McConaughey.
Oh.
We've written so many pilots with him in mind. Still haven't gotten in a room with them. So Matthew, if you're watching.
Matthew is a substitute teacher next season on Abbott Elementary. Let's make it happen. I want to thank all of you for joining me for this discussion and talk with me and opening up about everything about your shows and your careers, and best of luck to all of you at the Emmys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you guys.
Nice to meet
Yeah,
you,
you
Abe.
too, Abe.
Yeah, we'll see you on a lot walk at some point.
Sounds good.